learning nerds, and welcome on in to the nerdiest podcast that you're going to hear today. I'm your host, I'm Dr. Luke Hobson. I am someone who is obsessed with instructional design, teaching, and learning, and this show is all about sharing with you how to design meaningful, relevant, and interesting types of learning experiences for yourself and for your students. And of course, you can find all of the information that I have for you over at drlukehobson.com. And today's episode, folks, is all about Claude. I feel like I have finally seen the lights. I have been stuck in my ways of using ChatGPT for quite a long time. And of course, using Gemini and Notebook LM, I brought that into my world and I've been doing quite a bit with that. But Claude is different. Claude deserves its own episode of this podcast, and that's what you're going to hear today. This episode is about 4 different ways that I have been using Claude for literally 1 week. That's all I've done so far, and I've already been able to create so many things that I did not think was possible. And it's pretty crazy. This might be the first episode ever where I'm going to tell you that you should absolutely follow along and go to your computer or take out your smartphone and go to Claude and see what you can do in real time as we are talking about this. And today's episode, the script is directly coming from the LinkedIn newsletter Confessions of a Learning Nerd. So you can go over there if you want to be able to follow along with the visuals, but that's where this information is coming from today. And this obsession with Claude is completely my wife's fault. We were having a conversation and all of a sudden I was like, wait, how did you do that? And in her hand, it was an iPhone with a blank white canvas on the screen. When she tapped it, stars and squares and moons jumped off at the screen in these different types of colorful patterns. And then she shook her phone to erase the patterns and instead used 2 fingers to make a bright orange and red tic-tac-toe board. And we were in store for a 2-hour car ride with our baby, and she already finds light boxes to be really fascinating, and she's really quick. So just in case if she managed to steal her phone away from my wife, the idea was that there would be a type of a painting app for her to be able to play with. And as I picked up her phone, it went horizontal and everything got all messed up. So when I told her about that, she went right back to Claude, made an adjustment, and now the app was firmly locked in place. And the only way for our daughter to unlock the screen was if a combination of the side buttons in a very particular pattern. And I've had many conversations about Claude with friends and family and colleagues, but I didn't grasp what made this LLM different compared to Gemini and to ChatGPT. Those two already did everything that I wanted. So why was I going to be spending another $20 a month on yet another tool? I would have to be able to learn it and figure it all out. But this moment of seeing how my wife made an app for our baby within moments definitely made me have this type of a realization of like, wait a second, Claude can actually design a product, and that's a bit different. And with that one moment and seeing this app come together so quickly, 1,000 ideas popped into my head, and I quickly lost track of time. You know that feeling when you get in your car and then you're so preoccupied with something that you drive to your destination and before you know it, you just happen to be there? That was essentially this moment when I realized I could do a whole lot with this type of this AI sidekick that I've been hoping for all along. I didn't need something to correct my grammar. I didn't need something, again, to help me rethink a workflow process or something like that. I needed something to elevate my original ideas and to bring them to life. And now I want to share with you about what I've been working on because it's just so darn cool. And I would love for you to be able to replicate this and to bring this inside of your classrooms. The first idea is a simulation. I'm no stranger to simulations. I've used many in my courses, and I love creating custom GPTs to mimic the scenarios in simulations. You've heard me actually talk about them before. I've mentioned before about the instructional design interview coach that I made. I also made one for helping instructional designers with dealing with a unresponsive SME, and that was its own custom GPT. And they're fine, they're good, they work, but they lack refinement. And visually, they're really not that appealing at all. There are only so many things that I can actually do with OpenAI's interface, and I found that to be a limitation. The other issue that I've encountered over these years and doing a lot of workshops and presentations for faculty is that if they have any type of an issue with OpenAI security from like their institution's perspective, any type of a firewall issue or anything along those lines, well, then they come to me for help. And I essentially became like this OpenAI IT help desk person. And I was like, well, this is not the best use of my time. So overall, the concept was there with these different types of custom GPTs mimicking simulations, but it really needed assistance. So that was the idea. Can I take a SME simulation and kick it up a notch with Claude? And the answer was absolutely. I created a simulation, which you can see if you go down to the show notes, and I'll link to it so you can actually see this different type of a simulation and action you can actually play with it. And I created a simulation of an instructional designer working for Vermont University's online learning department. The instructional designer can then choose through 4 different types of challenging situations, like a SME's availability, scope creep, information overload, and faculty resistance. And all of these are ones that instructional designers face on a day-to-day type of a basis. In each of these scenarios, the user is introduced to a main character, like a faculty member, and then provided context on why there is a problem. The user has to decide how they want to respond to each prompt. Depending upon this action, this will then change the outcome of the situation. Each one can lead to a positive or negative outcomes, followed by a debrief and tips for the next move. At the end of the simulation, there is a breakdown with key takeaways. The best part about the simulation is that you can then adapt and change everything. I uploaded my articles about collaborating with subject matter experts to make the feedback stronger. I didn't like the original colors or the fonts, so I asked it to look like a more modern university, and because I keep on picking the name of Vermont University to be my fictitious one, it decided to make everything very green and eco-friendly as far as for mimicking everything with the Green Mountains over at Vermont. So it was very fitting for everything. And finally, the other big thing that I wanted to be able to change too was that it was too easy. The first version was incredibly easy. The correct answer was always B, no matter what you did. So it made it very predictable. And I asked Claude to randomize the answers and simply said, you need to make it harder. It's too darn easy. And after 4 different iterations of everything, that's when I have the final product that you can now actually see and use. And since this time, I have made so many more simulations, with the latest one that I've been working on that I'm actually trying to make it incredibly challenging and to take people like 20 minutes to be able to go through, because it's much more in depth. It's really intensive. It's about a completely different subject matter for things, but it is crazy to see what happens if you keep on putting more and more effort into the design. The next idea is websites. For live events on campus, I'm tasked with putting together resources for our learners. This can include anything from the day's agenda, additional resources, speaker information, optional activities, and things like that. You can kind of think about this like putting together a mini conference. And as you can imagine, it takes quite a bit of time to not only curate every item, but then deliver this to the learners. And with another live event that's going to be coming around the corner in spring, I wanted to see if Claude could take all of this information I gathered and housed it into one simple website. I found several resources to send to students on the latest of AI and leadership, like with articles and podcasts and reports. So I asked Claude to be able to create for me a site using MIT's colors along with the resources that I specifically found, create filters for making it easier to find the resources, and place the latest ones at the top. I also wanted title cards as previews for each resource, along with a filter and a sorting system, which took a couple of times to be able to get right. But after a few times and a few revisions, all of a sudden, I had a working website that completely looked like something from MIT, matched the look and feel that I was hoping for, and did everything that I was envisioning. So let's do a comparison for a second. Either I could have made a course announcement or sent out an email once again to students about each and every single one of these resources and making sure that they get them, communicating to the right team members, and so on and so forth. Or I could create a user-friendly live website that will constantly update for students, and I don't need to be involved to always keep on picking and choosing the next resources because they're directly pulling from all of the recommended types of sources that MIT has to offer. And if I did this right, and hopefully I did do this right, it's going to keep on pulling from those types of sources without me having to go back and forth all the time with trying to make these different forms of updates. And essentially, I made a type of an MIT AI leadership hub website that students now have access to. One of the things that I was so surprised about when sharing this with my teammates is that they also couldn't believe how fast it worked because it took me only a couple of tries. And then all of a sudden, before I know it, we are sharing this with the students to say, look at this, it's incredible. And of course, to then actually say, hey, Luke made this with Claude, and this is not something by a web designer or anything of a sort. You can't tell the difference. It's crazy to think of, and I literally have a degree in graphic design and web design. And along these same lines of thinking, I realized I could convert other GPTs into these different types of websites, with one of them being the Learning Science GPT. And maybe you remember this GPT, maybe you don't, but it is like a daily newspaper for learning sciences. It would just give you the latest and greatest research by pulling up from a couple of different types of selected journals, and it would give you an update about what just came out and a little bit of a summary on each of these different types of articles. And right now, I'm testing this out again, but in a different type of a capacity that I'm calling the Instructional Design Research Hub. And it's pulling from all of these different types of sources, and there's going to be having different types of populated fields based around what you are looking to learn more about. And I've even done this too with my own website that I gave my website and Libsyn, which is my RSS feed for this podcast, shared that with Claude, asked it to be able to scrape the different types of wording for the 130 episodes. And then that way I created this type of a podcast episode hub, because the old episodes get buried over time and they become a lot harder to be able to find with each and every new episode. So from this type of a hub, I also added in filters as far as for the year the episode was released. Was it a solo episode? Is it a guest episode? And different types of topics. So if you only want to learn more about instructional design specifically, or AI, or leadership, or entrepreneurship, learning, or teaching, I talk about all of these different types of things in a roundabout way over the last 130 something episodes. And that can directly pull from the database, which is my website, which is pretty darn crazy to be able to actually see live in real time. And the other thing that I will say too is that with all of these ideas that I'm mentioning about, they're not earth-shattering. Creating new websites for different types of resources that you already have within your institution is not groundbreaking by any means, but it's incredibly convenient. It's user-friendly. You're trying to be able to take this mindset and this approach about putting the students first in our designs. Well, we're literally doing that by trying to think about them and trying to being able to bring them this whole new way of highlighting and showcasing the awesome resources that we do have. My next suggestion for you to try out is prototyping. So 7 years ago, my wife, my dad, and I, we were all talking about a problem that organizations face with leaving the right person out of the room. We all experienced this in our career with a team that was being formed to lead a new initiative or to solve a problem. And then afterwards, you would find out that there was an incredibly valuable member of the team, and you just didn't know their background or their experiences, their education, their skill sets, or anything of the sorts. So all of the talent was in the building, but it was a visibility issue on who can contribute to what project. And I thought back to taking so many different types of assessments on personalities, on strengths, emotional intelligence, and then we just never used this information. It was just forgotten about and gone. So we came up with a very early concept of making like a combination of a baseball card with a fantasy football app to build the best team possible for the job to be done. In a fantasy football app, in case if you don't play, and you absolutely should, by the way, as a fantasy football fan, but if you don't, the idea is that you're going to be seeing different players and their statistics, and then you try to build out the best team possible for the highest chance of success. And this was a fun project, and putting this together and working obviously with my wife and my dad, it was really cool to being able to talk more about this, but it phased out over time. Other things came up and we all of a sudden kind of lost track of time. But this whole thing with Claude then made me say, could we revisit this idea? And what exactly would happen if I took the early documentation and I had a photoshopped file that I put together that was going to be about what this type of a player card would actually look like? And if I uploaded that, what would it do? And at this point in time was when I got the whole like, whoa, that is crazy kind of a moment. Claude generated for me statistics, a very clean type of this fantasy player card, employee card, whatever you want to be able to call it. It created a building the team option. It made a comparison feature for you to compare and contrast the skill sets of two employees and see who ranked higher in these different types of self-evaluated areas like communication, leadership, emotional intelligence, collaboration, adaptability, strategic thinking, and all these different types of measurements. And of course, while they're fictitious, like obviously none of these are real, if in theory someone wanted to be able to evaluate their skill set and do some form of an assessment to be able to demonstrate this, or to go to school for a additional certificate or a degree, or they complete, the PMP or whatever it is, they could then update this information to have this all-in-one visible feature for managers to see who does what and what is the best type of a combination of people to be on different types of projects. So if looking at all of this information, and oh, by the way, this is called the Dream Team app. I'm very creative. Yes, very indeed. I'm putting together the Dream Team app. And after seeing everything, how this came together on the website, then my wife started to actually build it out on the app and to further develop it. And it looks crazy. It's insane to be able to think about. I am someone who knows enough about HTML to be very dangerous, but not enough to being able to say that I can make a whole type of a brand new app, giving the statistics of different types of employees and such. I would have no idea where to be able to start with that. And now I'm seeing it literally work in my hands and I am playing with it. And I now want to be able to go back to all of these old ideas that I had that I documented. I documented a lot of things over the years of like, oh, it would be cool to make this or make this, but they never saw the light of day. And now I'm kind of curious as far as for making different types of prototypes, what I can actually bring to life. And my last suggestion is with interactive visuals. This suggestion is the start of my experimentation process. And after finishing another lecture with my EDD students, I was reviewing my slides and wishing I could do something more with them. I already knew that Claude could do quite a bit with improving slide decks, but that wasn't necessarily what I had in mind. I always share my slides with students before lectures, and I was wondering what if they could go through them and have a better kind of experience. I was thinking about this specifically for one slide that I had in mind, and it was the timeline of learning and development. And in the slide, it's a basic timeline on major milestones of instructional design, and it shows a topic and a very brief description. So think about how everything of instructional design originated in World War II, talking about Bloom's taxonomy, ADDIE, online learning. Now, of course, we have the generative AI boom and a few other different types of key areas all throughout essentially learning and development. But when you look at the slide, there's, of course, several different types of limitations because, for one, it's just a slide. It doesn't really do anything. And also, there's only so much space that I could put an entire timeline of everything. So this had me wondering, could I take this information and can I make it an interactive timeline? The students could select each topic and then it would expand with key terms, relevant facts, and maybe even a quote or two from a direct source. So off I went to Claude, and what it came up with was incredible. Sure enough, I was able to make an interactive timeline and greatly expand on my original slides. By selecting the point in time, the students could dive on in further into each and every different type of milestone. What was really a fun exercise about all of this too was that I sent it to some instructional design friends and I asked them, like, what would you change? I'm open to, trying to be able to change this up a bit. And I heard from a few of them about how I should add in other researchers, or I should pivot some moments in time. And why did you highlight this one, but not this one? I was like, sure. The thing with this and with every single suggestion, I can always go back to Claude. I can point to a key source on where to pull different types of information from and then say what I'm hoping for. And then sure enough, you're going to have a working prototype. And if you want to be able to experiment with the interactive timeline too, you can go to my website. You can actually see it on my site right now. Now, I want to reinforce that wording, by the way. I keep on mentioning the word prototype. And that's something that we should be really highlighting here, is that with everything that you've heard about today, it is a working prototype. They can always be updated. They can always be changed. And this is one key sentiment that I hear from folks, that they're disappointed by the first results. I mean, they're like, it wasn't that good, and you're going to move on. It's like, well, wait. Hold on a second. You need to treat this type of a first output as a failed experiment. You are not aiming for perfection just by trying to put in one prompt and then you're going to get something back that's magical and incredible and it looks amazing. You need to really dive on in deep and keep on making those changes and those recommendations, and don't just assume that Claude can read your mind. It's pretty darn incredible, but if you treat it like an intern it's their first day on the job and they don't know what they're doing, you need to train that person the right way, and Claude is kind of like the same thing, as with all generative AI tools. The other warning that I would definitely give for Claude specifically is that something might look incredible, but the functionality is terrible. So I've done this so far for a couple of the websites where I'm like, that is brilliant. I love it. It's ready to go. And then I click around and I'm like, the filters don't work. And I'm like, that says it goes to this link, but it doesn't go to that link. It goes to this other random page, or it will give you font that's literally not readable. And you're like, well, that color combination is terrible and not accessible. Like, I think we need to kind of change some things. So once again, just because it looks beautiful does not mean that it actually works, which is another reason for you to go back in and to keep on doing more iterations. And eventually you will have that type of a desired product which you were hoping for. The bottom line is that it's going to take some trial and error to be able to get something right. But what I have to say, folks, is that the results are incredible. That truly, I cannot believe what these simulations look like. I can't, being able to create the interactive timeline compared to just looking at a slide that's static and boring. It's crazy to me to see what I have been able to do. And also, once again, I've only been using Claude for a week. Literally 1 week to the day of this podcast episode coming out. So the fact that I've been able to do all of this within a short amount of time, you can do so much. Really, you can do so much. So please go forward, experiment, and then tell me, what did you do? What are you working on? Because I'm going to actually get a lot better at being able to do this. So whatever you're working on, share it with me. I'll keep on sharing with you my ideas. But especially for instructors and instructional designers, we now have a tool for creating different types of products that you can absolutely use. The amount of things that I've already put inside of different types of learning management systems that I've been using throughout my different universities that I work at, and they work. They need to do some different types of iterations as well for being inside of an LMS as compared to a type of a website. But once again, everything still works by trying to just do a few different types of tweaks and changes. So it's crazy. Really, really crazy. And with all that said, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hope you follow along. Once again, I can't wait to hear from you and to learn more about what you are experimenting with. If you enjoyed the show, you know what I'm going to say. Give it a 5-star rating wherever you are listening. Please feel free to give it a review. Those really do help out the show to grow. And of course, be a friend, tell a friend, share this with someone who doesn't use Claude right now and blow their minds because this stuff is insane. If you haven't yet already, sign up for Confessions of a Learning Nerd newsletter over on LinkedIn. And of course, you can sign up on my website, drlukehobson.com, to join the mailing list. And that is all I have for you today. Stay nerdy out there. I'll talk to you next time.